Hi everyone, and welcome to Heavybit and to this panel around efficient lead gen and marketing ops. Really excited to be here with this panel of marketing experts. My name is Alex, and I'm the director of marketing at a company called Overops. We were actually based in Heavybit until not too long ago, where we were kind of starting our go-to-market activity, and I was mainly leading lead gen, and today I'm focusing most of my time on translating that activity into sales opportunities. So let's kick this off by introducing the members of the panel. To my immediate left, I have Kevin. He's the director of marketing ops at MongoDB, and he's focusing most of his time on marketing's contribution to pipeline and tooling. He was previously doing marketing operations at Twilio and Fastly. To his left, we have Alison. She's the CMO at Social Chorus, and formerly held executive positions at Verto Analytics, 6 Sense, and Gigam. And to her left, we have Ryan. He's a marketing advisor and consultant working with companies like Algolia. He was formerly the VP of marketing at Sentry and marketing executive at Signal FX and Cloudera. To get things going, maybe give everyone a little bit of context about what you do on your day-to-day. Let's start with you, Kevin.
I'm Kevin Liu. I run marketing operations analytics at MongoDB. I would say 50% of my time is based on like looking at operations, running the day-to-day, campaign execution, building processes, looking at technologies, integration of those technologies, and the other half is looking at our funnel, marketing analytics, which conversions, different MQL volume, SAL volume, those types of things.
Alison Murdoch. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Social Chorus. We're a workforce communications platform, which you're probably like, well, why do I need a platform? Because I got email, But when you're a giant company the size of AT&T or Anheuser-Busch, you have 150,000 employees spread around the world, and a lot of them are on email. You need something, system of record for communication. So that's what we do. And I have been at Social Chorus for about a year and had to completely build the marketing team from scratch. Demand gen is incredibly important because we are practicing account-based marketing. We only really sell to companies of 3,000 employees and more. So we have a very focused list of people to sell to.
Currently, as Alex mentioned, I'm working with a company called Algolia, which is a little bit later stage, but prior to that, I had been early stage at companies who had great traction in the market in terms of adoption, but needed marketing to come in and help facilitate change. Basically, in some cases, force a change. So putting in place systems and strategies and processes that were meant to think through how to get users to put a value against the product and think through the longevity of the relationship with the product and how to operationalize that relationship.
What does efficient lead gen look like to you? How would you define kind of how does success look like for a lead gen engine? Let's start with you, Kevin.
Oh, me? I think efficient lead gen is really just like something that's like scalable, right? Like you can't do what you do like right now. Like if you're, as a small company, you're like, kind of sifting through all these leads and like, going able to, it's like something that's scalable, right? That's going to be able to, you go from like 5 leads a day to 10 leads a day to 100 leads a day to 1,000 leads a day. You need something that's going to be able to scale with what you're doing, right? So I'm an operations, so I'm going to talk about efficiencies and operations and things like that. But like you need to have like something that like a filter in place, like lead scoring or something that you're able to say like these are the leads we want to pass into like sales or we want to follow up with. Not even if you don't have a sales team, these are the leads we want to follow up with. We have all these leads a day. How we're going to follow up with it, and then also being able to report off it and have a feedback mechanism on the leads that you're passing through.
I mean, for me, there's two things. I think it's defining the pathways for leads that come in. A lot of that, there's when you're starting out, there can be a lot of heavy lifting around lead gen. Like somebody's got to respond to everyone just to be nice, and I think you can automate a lot of that. So, there really should be a defined set of pathways which allow you then to automate. And the second thing is kind of a bit of planning. So understanding which companies you want to sell to, which is, could be defined and redefined like every 6 months as your business evolves. But knowing, then how to automate. Oh, these companies are too small. Let's send them that email rather than have a human follow up. Being able to track then the lifetime of the lead. So from the beginning all the way to that, is that a closed one, and what was the value and how much did it cost to get that lead? So knowing all that is really important.
Yeah, I mean, Allison kind of nailed it. This idea that there's a plan for the leads that you're acquiring, such that you're able to kind of just from the top at point of acquisition determine which ones go into this bucket because they need a lot more nurture. They are not attractive for whatever reason. They don't score highly. They don't have a quite the right kind of fit. And this other hopefully large bucket, they match the cohort of desirable leads such that you have a series of plans, whether they're high touch or automation touch, that you have a pretty high level of predictability about what will happen once you put them into the next stage of their path towards a sales opportunity, or in a lot of cases with developer tools companies, self-serve opportunity.
When is a good stage to introduce these platforms? What's a good lead volume to get started with Marketo or Salesforce?
Depends on the nature of your business. I mean, it really comes down to that. So if your business is like completely self-serve, day one is a really good time for marketing automation, because otherwise you're kind of leaving it up to the product to do all of the work. If your product is great, it's still not enough. Because typically the onboarding process, requires a series of touches that are both in the product itself as well as via email and other channels. If your product is kind of high touch enterprise sales, you should probably have marketing automation or marketing operations, because then you have some ability to score effectively and get some signal towards making the most of your sales organization's time, such that everyone, AEs all the way down to SDRs and BDRs, are orienting towards efficiency.
I can't personally imagine a world where you wouldn't have marketing automation if you have a number on your head. I mean, how are you going to report? How are you going to run campaigns and take the heavy lifting out of marketing to non-ready customers? I mean, just, if somebody were to say, okay, well, here, take this great job in marketing, but we don't have marketing automation, and we're not going to buy it. I'm like, I'm not taking that job. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense in today's, my personal opinion, sorry, but.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so, and kind of the first big topic we thought of covering is kind of laying the foundation for lead gen, and a lot of companies are taking their first steps by trying a lot of things, seeing what sticks, and trying to get those first few customers and replicate that process. How do you get started when there's not a lot of data to base your decisions on? Kind of, how do you approach that the definition of the early persona?
You have to, understanding your business and your product. You're going to make some guesses on who you're selling to. You might be wrong, but remember, B2B is selling to a committee. It's not selling to one person. If you're selling to one person, that's a whole different thing. You've got to get it right the first time. That's a whole nother, I don't think we're talking about that tonight. But so you can make some educated guesses, and then from there, what does your database look like? You've got to build that first, because then otherwise you're just, and your SDRs or your BDRs can do this, but just prospecting. That's the foundational stuff. And going through persona work, it's defining what is that person's pain points, what are they suffering, or what are the 3 messages you want to deliver to them. You don't have to do it all or plan for 6 months, but you've got to get started with some of that foundational work.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like we have this phrase we always use, like analysis paralysis, right? Like if we're like, we don't have enough data and we don't know where to start, like it's better to start somewhere and then like just going through these motions of like, I don't know, but you should know your customer best, you know your product the best, right? So you have just an ideal phase of like who you should be marketing to and what you should be marketing.
And if you get stuck too, it's really great to just ask your customers. A couple times. We were trying to get positioning right. We had this one customer, and we said, well, how would you describe what we do? And he said, well, I can do all this stuff, but I can't do this stuff, and this is what you do. And well, it became our tagline, and it became the way that we sold our product. So, I mean, there's always a way to get the answer, but you've got to start somewhere, or else you're, again,
yeah, I mean, so
nowhere.
there's a lot of pressure in small companies on marketers to figure out segmentation and personas that capture the entire market. And then that's the point at which you're like, oh, I have so much opportunity that I need some kind of system of record to make sure that we're handling all this opportunity. Probably a bad strategy. That kind of downward pressure in terms of making decisions that are based on a market that's not well understood is probably the wrong way to approach it. Usually you want to narrow things down and actually get a smaller base of prospective high value users that you're targeting first. So this idea of having like personas and segments is the right thing, but like get into subsidiaries, like get into like the smaller version of that persona such that you're able to say like, hey, if we capture more in our net, great, but like the type of person, the type of user, the type of organization that will have the most value here is this, and we can define them very, very narrowly and put in place the systems and the processes that serve that high value opportunity, whether it's ultimately self-serve or handheld sales is irrelevant, but like starting from a very, very narrow base is probably a good strategy.
And kind of tying back to these personas, how fine-grained are you going when defining them? I think most of the companies here are selling to developers and technical audiences. So we have, we have architects, we have DBAs, we have operations, we have developers.
The easiest way, if you're talking about developer tools, is to say what else is in the stack. So if you're able to define it by like, hey, they have this kind of repository, they have this kind of CI motion, or do they have a CI motion, CD motion at all? What is their security strategy? What is their customer support, technical support, QA motion? Like these things can be definitive in terms of getting like a firmographic view. Also, don't be afraid to say like, hey, developers within this industry or this type of company are probably most attractive to us because of X, Y, Z. Even though the developer doesn't necessarily start by saying, hey, I care about financial services or I care about transactions. If they've been there for more than a few months, they start to think of themselves that way.
What are some channels that work well with technical personas? Is it the trial or open source version of a product, or if you don't have that, conferences, investing in content marketing?
I think regardless of channel, like I think it's just really the messaging you have for that channel, right? You can have like display ads that are targeted to developers. You can have display ads that are targeted to executives, right? I think as long as the messaging is correct, you can use any channel to target someone, right? Like you have a meetup group that's like a hackathon, or you can have a meetup group that's you can have a dinner, executive dinner, those types of things. So in my opinion, like any channel is effective as long as the messaging is resonating with your personas. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and Alison and Ryan, I think you've had a chance to build marketing teams from the ground up. So what were kind of the first few channels that you invested in?
I would say for me, it was largely dependent on the business that the company I was working at. I mean, it's what are the leverage points that you have? So the previous company I was at was in consumer behavioral research. So that we had proprietary data on how consumers use technology. And from that, we were able to do a lot of content marketing, which would tell stories about the way people shop, or when do moms shop in the middle of the night, and why do they do that? And so it was really interesting to prospects and helped us get a lot of inbound marketing. So we sort of doubled down on content marketing for this company because we really are very focused on a certain number of buyers. Demand gen is really important. So you have to look at, think about what your strategy would be, and then hire those people and make sure they're supported. So if you don't have headcount, there's so many great contractors out there. I mean, that's the way I've always run it. I have this great database of vetted vendors, and always, have people sending me, oh, talk to this guy, he's great on coding emails or in Marketo or whatever. That's what you have to do when you're at a startup. You hustle.
Especially with technical users, there's always a workflow. You're never defining anything from scratch. Even if your product is definitive, there's some workflow that precedes it and follows it, and you're usually trying to optimize or make it more effective. From a operational strategy perspective, you'll find, if you look at the data, that the highest value, highest quality leads tend to be the ones that come as referrals or come from a third party that that has like an entrenched audience that is already paying a lot of money to some other vendor and is looking to rationalize that investment or how their time is spent. So using content as a platform, but then using that platform to be able to, in balance, both serve your partners, your technology partners, your integration partners, as well as their users, is a pretty good strategy. I mean, the last few companies that I've worked at that have targeted technical users, that has kind of proven itself out both in practice and in data. That if you figure out like how your channel is affected by other folks who have much larger entrenched user bases, you can rarely go wrong.
One of the things that we heard from the audience that they're interested to hear more about account-based marketing. And Alison, I think when we had a conversation last week, you mentioned that one of the things that you wish you would have done sooner was identifying those 100 tier one accounts. Can you elaborate a bit?
Yeah, I mean, account-based, it's thrown around a lot, and it's like, look, these are the companies we want to win. 100 of them there, we want all these people. It's really that simple, but it's hard to sometimes get sales on board because sales will normally think, well, wait a minute, we got to go after way more people. And they're right, except for that it's not what I said earlier, it's not one buyer, it's a committee of buyers who are extremely influential in the deal, and you have to understand that. And that's why when you do persona work, if you spend too much time on that, you're wasting time because it's going to change again and again as your business evolves and become more well-known. So with account-based marketing, the reason why I said that is I think that we didn't, because the marketing engine wasn't set up from the get-go, we didn't really have all the data to say these are the most important companies. And so the way that we did it is we prioritized by whether they had an open opportunity, whether we'd ever had close loss with them, whether they were the right employee size, how much we thought they would spend on employees based on the revenues of their company, all sorts of things. So we did 3 tiers, and then we have a different strategy for each tier, and then report on how we're progressing with each of these accounts, and then have playbooks more or less for each of the personas in it. So it gets pretty complicated, and we're just rolling out a lot of these things. What we've really been able to accomplish is reporting on how our strategy is affecting the sales performance, and like from channel, for example, just to be specific, like what do events do for us? So they cost a lot of money and they're a lot of work, but how much pipeline have we influenced, driven, or even gotten originally sourced, closed, won? So we can say we sourced, a couple $1 million from this one thing we did. So with account-based marketing, it just gives you a lens and a focus and a way to even personalize, and personalization is something that people talk about right now. And if you're a startup, it's not that cheap yet to do.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the technology, you can't afford the technology, you can also personalized to 100 accounts. That's not much for your SDRs to say, hey, Alex, I've read that your company's doing this, you might be interested in. And it's that extra touch that people pay attention to when they're on the receiving end. It's very old school, but it actually works.
So for ABM, what do you find them to be the metric that matters?
Well, I think it's about the progress of the account. Are you getting like sales velocity? And whether, so that's our big metric. So one of the things that we get stuck on, there's a certain point at which IT gets involved in the sale. We're selling, it's like selling to marketing where, but not because it's communications or HR. So IT is very involved when employees are part of the equation. So as marketers, we can just say, yeah, we want the service, and we don't even have IT. So it's like not even a question. with larger companies, IT is like, what's your security? What's this? What's that? And things would get stuck, right? So our measure of success is, can we shorten the sales cycle by involving the buyers the influential buyers, so not just the champion, but the influential buyers earlier in the sales cycle by marketing to them with messaging that matters to them. If you're IT, you don't care about the value prop per se. You're like, oh, that's nice, but are you going to create more work for me? So that's one of the main metrics we're looking at with ABM. All of the things like MQLs and so forth, it's important to know that you're tracking to what metrics people are usually looking at, but less so. It's like, did you win? Are you winning? And are you winning faster? And is the deal size what you expected?
So pipeline's important.
Pipeline is extremely important, yes.
Kevin, I think like a big focus of your role is looking at pipeline, right? What are some of the metrics you track around along the funnel?
Yeah, so from like we have a traditional funnel, right, which is like inquiry, MQL, SAL, like, and then we look at conversion rates and then where people dropped off and like why they dropped off, right? So from the ABM perspective, very similar to what Allison said, is like we look at velocity. We look at like average deal size. Are we bringing bigger deal sizes in? We also look at like net new names, right? Like, is this account, we're doing an ABM strategy to this account, or bringing net new names from that account? How big are we growing our database on that account specifically? Just so we have like, more information or more people that we're trying to influence.
Well, and I think there's another important thing with ABM that we haven't really brought up, which is the funnel, right? This is net new names come in, got closed one, bye-bye. No, it does not work that anywhere. Definitely not with SaaS businesses. It's a infinite loop. You're going to have to renew those people in 12 months, 2 years, whatever. So all those net new names, they're tiered too. It's not just, oh, we never heard of that company. They fit into tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. Plus, people leave and they go to another company, and you get new people coming in. So you've got to keep an eye on the fact that you're going to need to renew them. And so CS is that, like you say, sales and marketing, they need to be best friends. Well, customer success is another part of that. And depending on how your company is set up, they may be in charge of renewals, or you may have account management. So one of the things to really think about, and we haven't talked about stack yet, is a company like Gainsight part of the stack? It depends on what you're doing, but I think it's really important to think about the funnel differently.
So what I see most often in terms of like where ABM starts to break down is on the sales development side. So it's not that complex to come up with an account list. A sales leader will just figure it out. If they have AEs, they probably already have an account list from which they're working. Then passing that account list to the demand generation organization to be targeted in terms of its spend and focus in acquisition and remarketing. What breaks down typically is once those people are into the funnel, they've been touched, they've engaged in some way, to make sure that there is some process for the first line of defense for sales, which is always sales development or business development, to customize, personalize, focus, prioritize based on title, persona, company, all those kinds of things, because historically they're trained to just go at scale. They find a sequence that works and they apply it everywhere. So this is actually where product marketing becomes part of the process for ABM and lead generation, because if you don't have that assist from the folks who are thinking about the market and the user and the persona, then no matter how good your ABM strategy is for acquisition and getting like very high probability SQLs coming in at acquisition points, that efficiency breaks down if effectiveness is not invested at the first sales touch.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think because SDRs have so much volume, I mean, I'd make a certain number of calls and send out emails, and now, using, outreach or something, it's like, mass marketing. And so it's really important as marketing team to look at those sequences. But also one of the things we've experienced is they were told to go after one specific title. And it was like, whoa. Yeah. Guess who funds this deal? It's not them. Yeah. It's this guy and this guy. So and so when you look at how they're compensated and all of that, it gets really complicated. And so you have to keep your finger on the pulse. I mean, the point is, like, you're never done,
Yeah.
with the assessment or analysis. I mean, you have to really take stock probably every quarter. And if you don't have time, okay, twice a year.
Yeah, integration is hard, but it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
But it's still hard.
The second topic we wanted to touch on was also mentioned earlier. There's the marketing stack, which is also always kind of the elephant in the room in every conversation about marketing. So, what are some of the tools that you're using right now?
Yeah, so just for MongoDB, we actually have like 40 different pieces of technology in the marketing stack.
So I've heard.
Yeah,
So I can't even believe it. The former CMO was like, I have like at least 40, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I've never heard of these things. So yes.
So at the core, we use Eloqua and we use Salesforce. Those are like our two main tools.
Eloquent. Wow.
Yeah, Eloqua is like, I worked at Eloqua.
I don't think anybody knows your name.
Yeah, I know. Eloqua is like, I know everyone's like Marketo or
Yeah.
Pardot.
That's the
or
iPhone
like,
versus Android of marketing.
yeah, exactly. So we're a big Eloqua shop.
Okay.
So at the core, Eloqua, Salesforce, and then what's important is like our predictive scoring, which is like we use Lattice as like a predictive scoring, which is new. Yeah, I have an issue with like when people say like AI, like predictive scoring AI. I don't think it's really like no one really has like a true AI type model for predictive scoring, but we use that for predictive scoring. So at the core, we use that. We use things like Conversica, Lean Data, Demand Base. I can name all 40, but we have like a pretty big marketing stack.
What's the most important in your stack in terms of just categorizing without the vendor name? Like what really makes a difference between success and failure?
Yeah, I would
Is that
say like Eloqua for sure is really important. Just how like customizable it is. Like Eloqua is not user friendly at all. If you ever like use Eloqua, it's like you need an Eloqua expert, like for sure.
You need like 5.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you know how to use it and you know how to utilize it, it's very powerful. It's like very robust. It can do a lot of things like data cleansing, data enrichment, data manipulation, lead routing, a lot of different things. So it's like
Cool.
a great tool if you know how to use it. But I would say it's a steep learning curve for sure. And then Salesforce is like our main reporting for marketing. We report off of leads and like, are they converting? Are they not converting? And we look at conversion. That's all in Salesforce, but we use Full Circle Insights. If you ever heard of it, it's like a marketing funnel tool, but it's not really good for like ABM.
Yeah.
ABM is kind of like we use a various couple tools for that one, and it's like more like outside. We do like data warehousing in Tableau type of thing.
Okay.
And Ryan, let me kind of make this question harder for you. So what advice can you give to a company that's just getting started, and like what are some of the few essential tools that they need to get started with?
Yeah, this is an unpopular position, but so I've worked, even though I am not a full-time marketing operations professional, I have worked in Eloqua, Pardot, Marketo, HubSpot. If you're just getting started, and no matter what stage of maturity your marketing is in, but you just need something to understand leads and pass leads and do scoring, HubSpot is invaluable. It's a very, very imperfect tool considering it tries to do so many things. But I have found, given the cost-benefit analysis of just like helping the sales organization based on some level of inbound opportunity, HubSpot gets it done, and you don't have to hire someone who speaks a language.
Yeah.
Like we forget that like Marketo and Eloqua, they started off as languages. They were programming languages.
Yeah.
And even though a lot of the user interface has improved such that they don't seem like languages any longer, under the hood they still are. HubSpot is not. HubSpot is a series of modules that enable some level of scoring, passing, creation, those kinds of things. So for pound for pound, dollar for dollar, HubSpot was a lifesaver for me at Sentry. You can ask the sales organization if they agree, but from a marketing perspective, it was really helpful.
Yeah, I would agree. HubSpot, having used Marketo, and I didn't really grok onto Pardot, it's not one of my favorites, but HubSpot, what I was really impressed with is their onboarding. When you're a small marketing team, they're excellent. And also, yeah, just being able to spin up landing pages very quickly and not have to hire an expert. And they've really improved their product. I used it years ago and then used it again. I was like, wow, this is pretty great. Not the same level of reporting, I would say, as Marketo, but
Nope.
I think back to tools just for a second. I think it's important. Probably, obviously marketing automation, Salesforce, and, obviously if you're managing social media, you want something like Hootsuite, all these things you just want it all to plug back in. But we just switched to Visible to be able to show what is working in our channel. And so something like BrightFunnel was acquired by Terminus, so now they're going into ad orchestration. So we kind of ditched them and went to Visible. But we're able to show specifically how much money did we spend on this channel and what is the ROI. And it's all, again, like we don't have to put it in spreadsheets. It's done for us. And it's really helpful to use a tool like that to educate our sales team about why we're doing these things and what the return was and how the accounts were effective. The other thing I would say is we use 6sense, which is a Lattice competitor. That's so I used to work there, but that doesn't matter. Their product is amazing. What it does is gives us the North Star about some of our customers, pulling in insights that we would never see in marketing automation. It's basically, what are the search terms this account is looking for? Are they searching for our competitors? So it really helps our sales organization know when an account is leaning in, and also if they've moved from, kind of an education phase into kind of a purchase or decision-making phase. And we get alerts that we send to our sales team, but also to our SDRs about where they should focus. So even within our tiers, there are going to be signals that they can use to then reach out to people in a timely way. And that's been really, really, really helpful for our team.
So I saw the LinkedIn post from Megan, who was the former CMO of MongoDB, and she listed all those tools that went into the stack. And it kind of made me reflect on sort of this idea of like, if you're early stage, and especially if you're a developer tools company, and most likely your CEO is developer, him or herself, probably has been doing that exclusively and is now taking on responsibility for the business, there's a very low likelihood that they'll have a lot of comfort with even one of the tools in that list, no less all of them. And so you kind of have to remind yourself, like the same way that you approach marketing at large in terms of like defining who your audience is, defining who the most likely persona or user is to convert, and kind of being like narrow and deep in terms of targeting. It's the same thing applies to the stack. So as a marketer, especially on the operations or demand generation side, you have to remember, even if you've used these tools in the past, the person who holds budget probably isn't going to be prepared to invest in a lot of them. So you have to make a case for like what's truly important, what pain are you trying to solve now, and make a really articulate and clear case for how it affects adoption of the product and conversion to monetize user. That's the path towards getting the right tools into your stack, is before you even present it to your boss, say it to yourself, like, what's a priority here? Like, what do I need to do today? Otherwise, I'm going to sink.
Well, and that's the thing. You as a marketer, look, I'm just going to tell you, like most companies, definitely C-suite, they don't understand there's no silver bullet for marketing. Guess what? There's a lot of things you have to do, and a lot of things will work and a lot of things will not work. And so it's hard to get credibility as sometimes just saying, look, we need to do this. So you can always fall back on the argument, why do you need Hootsuite? Because it's $295 a year, or whatever. I don't even know what it costs. But nonetheless, what I'm saying is it's time is money. So do you want me to spend time on this or this? Because really, like when you have a lean stack, that's what it comes down to.
And kind of just to keep it a little bit balanced. So you're using Eloqua, and Overops is using Marketo. So it's really kind of, I think it's like having an objective way to choose your favorite sports team, kind of choosing your favorite marketing automation platform. So yeah, okay, let's just leave it at that. And kind of one question that I wanted to ask before moving on to Q&A is about the relationship between marketing and sales. Where kind of similar to in engineering, where you have developers on one hand and then operations on the other hand, where they have to kind of maintain whatever the developers wrote, and there's this kind of movement of DevOps that kind of promotes shared accountability. A similar shift is happening with marketing and sales, that they're both accountable for pipeline. So from your own perspectives, where does the responsibility of marketing end and where sales starts, or is there a cutoff at all?
I don't think there's really a cutoff. Like in my opinion, like I pass the sales on to lead. Like I pass a lead on to sales, and you know, my job's not done, right? Like I need to find out like why they fell off, or like why they didn't continue down. You know, like why didn't they become an opportunity? Why didn't they? Like what could we do better? And then, you know, the way we structure marketing and sales is marketing is responsible for X amount of the business, right? So we need to understand like why it didn't convert, why it didn't happen, right? So like when marketing is talking in sense of dollars, like when you like a more mature marketing organization, everyone's going to talk in the sense of like, this is marketing source dollars, right? So we're responsible for X% of the revenue that comes in. We need to understand like why our leads aren't converting, why, you know, things are converting, and then like what we can do better. So there is a handoff portion where sales will take over, but we need to understand the full funnel. I don't really think there's like a clear cut, like marketing loses responsibility and now it's like sales responsibility. I think it's always going to be everyone's responsibility for.
Yeah, I would say we view it similarly, but I think we try to put some markers. You know, our job in marketing, you know, and when I always tell startups this, like, if you can only focus on two things, it's awareness and delivering revenues. You know, it's it. So our job at the top of the funnel is, do people know what we do? Are they interested? Are they leaning in? But then, you know, when it comes down to the pipeline itself, we are responsible for creating ways for potential customers to engage with us. It's events, it's content, it's webinars, whatever it is. Having come into a company where a lot of that stuff wasn't happening, we were able to show impact where they were like, oh, great, this customer's coming to this dinner, or this customer's reading something, some thought leadership piece, or they've seen press about us and now they're calling us. So that's partly our job. Sales job is to take it across the finish line. As your company grows, you'll have more and more impact all the way through to the end of the life cycle. Like I said, it's an infinite loop, it's not a funnel. We are now responsible for getting them to this critical point in which everybody agrees, hey, we want to become a customer. Now it's about getting the deal done. Sales got to take it across. But, you know, we're still really in the middle of that influencing.
Especially early stage, this is a hard thing to do, but the best lesson that any company can learn is that ARR and ARR growth is a responsibility of every single person employed by the company.
100%,
like no matter what your role is, if the denominator of your success metric isn't revenue, then you're sunk. And if you're not thinking about revenue as the denominator of the success metric, then you have too much VC backing and not enough relevance in the market. Like you've lost sight of what's important.
There's too much pattern matching.
I hear it so often from founders, this idea of like, we need to gain ubiquity, then we will educate, and then we'll eventually create a category, and then we'll monetize.
So exhausting.
Fine, like that's fine, but like, you actually have to have like some velocity, some speed towards monetization early on to show that like the effort that goes into ubiquity and education is relevant. Otherwise, you'll get eaten by some smarter, faster competitor. So with ARR as the denominator, or some level of revenue as the denominator, marketing can have different portions of the numerator. You know, it's a math equation. So you try and figure out like what the contribution margin is, and how to allocate. And look, if you have the right kind of stack and you have the right kind of data and you have the right kind of like strategy, then you can not rely on like single point attribution. You can do like full journey. That's rad.
Yeah,
like,
I completely agree. I mean, there's almost there's pretty much no excuse to not know where the effect of the work you're doing.
And
I mean,
but it's hard.
It's hard. I mean, there's only, I would say PR is still, hard unless you use UTM codes and you're really good at that, and people actually type, like click, which they don't. So they'll Google you and you've got to be able to make some inferences. But nonetheless, I think there's almost everything we do, we can capture the value of that. And it becomes a little bit like head scratching after a while, and you're like, oh my God, are we really doing this? Like, this is missing the point.
Yeah.
But you can. And so, when you're going back to building a team, the person that I have in charge of demand gen, and we spent a lot of time saying, what can we be showing to the executives, to the board, that they can see, marketing was reinvented in the last year. What are we doing? What's the impact we're having on sales? How much growth can we generate from the activities we're doing? And you've got to have those numbers. If you don't know your numbers, then you're really sunk, because your VCs gave you all this money and you don't know a thing. That's just,
and
it's just no excuse.
I've been in that situation. I've been early enough stage that like we don't know the numbers, but the fact of the matter is like you have to be trying towards it at all times.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of, and I would say a lot of, actually I see this more at board level than maybe even the C-suite, but I've been presenting to the board and they're like, wow, we didn't know you could track all this stuff in marketing. I'm like, yeah, so marketing has changed and most people don't know that it's like engineering for sales. I mean, I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out how to best phrase it, but you really can track more than you ever could before. So it's worth doing and investing time in and being, that's why when I talk about running experiments, it's a good thing to do, saying, should we invest in this persona? Can we get new opportunities? Let's try it. Let's see, what are the numbers? Is this better than benchmark? Oh yeah, it is. Worth a try for 6 months.
Thanks so much. And that's it from my end. And we have about 15 minutes left, so let's open this up to questions.
It's always hard to do. Serve the heck out of your partners. One of the truisms of my experience as a marketer is that there's always someone who is in the workflow of your user, who has total relevance and entrenched audiences who still have some kind of problem. And your goal in marketing is to rationalize the time spent and the money spent on that tool by kind of offsetting some of the things it does poorly. From a content perspective, or any kind of marketing really, don't try and get them to partner with you on the creation of the story because they have way bigger fish to fry. Complement the crap out of what they do. Like, figure out a way to create a story using a customer narrative if you can, that talks about like how the two things work together properly, and how the value and benefit of the larger tool is only enhanced by like not making it responsible for so many things that it's not necessarily great at. And 4 times out of 10, like 40% of the time, the larger partner organization will embrace that story and put it in front of its audience. And usually when that happens, you'll see like a significant increase in your inbound demand. But you can't just do it once. You can't say, oh, I picked this important partner, and GitHub doesn't have a policy for adopting this kind of content, or Docker ignored me. So what? Just like keep on doing it because it's important to your audience as well. Like, just bottom line, serve the partner, do their work for them.
I'd love to answer that. I feel like so part of it, your second question is the first thing you should do which is where are you going to focus first? If you can only hire one person, what are the advantages you have at your company? So can't answer that. You would have to come up with that. Think hard about it. Obviously, experience. You're hiring. If you feel like it's demand gen, obviously they need to have experience in that, and have used the technology before. With content marketing, you need to be a good writer. Need to understand promotion and how to come up with a storyline and so forth. But so finding the right person is really a lot about attitude, and are they curious, and do they want to learn how to affect your sales, for example, or how to bring customers in? Are they the kind of person who's adaptable? So maybe today their job is content marketing and now they're owning other things. Look for that. Is it that the right type of person? But then also the skill set, and definitely do not be afraid to test their work.
I agree. Like, I think for me, like everything that Allison said, and like more like, am I learning things through the interview process through them, right? Like I was like, if we have this pain point, and then like I learn like new things from them during the interview process, like maybe things like an angle I didn't think of, or something that I wasn't, aware of. Like I think that's really like kind of like an eye opener for me during like the interview process. So.
I try to hire in twos. So I always think of the first hire as an output engine. Usually the best trick to find an output engine is someone who hasn't done that exact job before.
Yeah.
They're like super hungry and they're super driven and they've observed the job that they want to do from, either intimately or from afar, and they have opinions on how to do it better. And then the second hire has to be a strategist, because that first person will know jack about strategy and will not be focused on outcomes at all. And you don't really want them to, because if you ask them to be focused on both output and outcomes, they're going to do neither particularly well. So the second person has to be really like, okay, let's put some structure around this because I have the experience, I have the insight, and I know what actually counts in terms of driving the business. The first person can be all about like scratching and clawing at like getting that thing that they're going to put, and say like, my name is attached to this, and all of the engineers in the organization loved it. But the second person has to be like, okay, how do we make this work do more work? How do we actually make it targeted at the thing that we actually care about and count against, which is board metrics?
Yeah, and I would agree, like as you build your team to having those, thinking about not everybody has to be exactly like you or like exactly like each other. You have to have a really good mix of people who can do strategy, work really hard, as well as somebody who's, very analytical, whatever it is. A good blend is what you want, because marketing is all of that. So.
Yeah, and with marketing becoming more like engineering, it's kind of we're looking for this full stack marketer for early stage teams.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. When I just take that because so the previous company I was at was a company out of Finland. Okay, so nobody knew them, number one, but we had data. So content marketing, we're tiny, right? And so, but we were able to tell great stories. So just to give you a proof point, I said PR is not trackable. We went from 0 PR to 600 pieces of coverage in 1 year.
Wow.
That's content marketing. That doesn't matter if it's PR, it's content marketing. So I think the hacks are one really important hack. If you can manage research, if you don't have data at your company that's anonymized and able to tell a story no one's ever heard before, research surveys is very effective, especially if it's, again, non-obvious insights. That would be my biggest recommendation with content marketing.
Yeah, so I was the first marketer at a company called Mixpanel, which is kind of famous for a lot of reasons. Some of them good, some of them bad. But a lot of Mixpanel's rise was related to its ability to do just that. They were able to look at market and behavioral trends longitudinally, and not talk about themselves, but talk about like what that meant in the real world. So they did this really interesting analysis and just kind of like fumbled their way into it of like, hey, we have signal on iOS adoption before anybody. Let's just publish what our insights are on that trend. And then lo and behold, the media was actually really interested in that because Apple was the biggest company in the world.
We got a call from a very important company about some data we put out that showed a very precipitous decline in their product. And it was that big company, and we were like, wow, I think this must be working. So, I think it can be very powerful, but again, you have to understand what you've got that nobody else has. So. And
it really comes down to how you package and present it. So like, Okta and Zapier do a really great job of saying like, hey, here are the trends on our platform within our space. Great, fantastic. It's great for your audience. But that's probably not going to get picked up in the larger world. Like Forbes and New York Times aren't looking for those specific things. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But like being able to determine what behaviors are beyond your platform tend to be kind of interesting, and they add a little level of human interest. And like putting on your product marketing hat for a second, if you're able to present your brand and your product in a larger context such that like there are just more touch points when you actually do get to the like the relevant story about like what your product is for. There will just be more of a context for like understanding it because it will have already like resonated in some way previously with most audiences, whether they're the right audience or not. So like Datadog did a nice job of saying like, hey, Docker is a thing. Let's talk about Docker adoption metrics based on what we're seeing. That got a lot of pickup because like at the time, you know, the shifts in the way products were built was interesting beyond just like their immediate users who are like SREs and operational engineers. And it just like puts them in a position where they're able to say like, we have some authority over this and we have some like level of interest beyond like our core set of practices.
Yeah, and my kind of background, I was in media, so I worked at GigaOM, so it's cloud, you know, whenever I worked at different publications and, you know, work really closely with writers. And from the editorial perspective, what we're always looking for were original viewpoints, right? Things that had not been heard before. So, you know, I kind of echo that in that you need to, it's not, content marketing kind of gets wrapped up in marketing, but really today's world, there's fewer and fewer journalists. So even if you can get on Forbes and to the Tech Council and write something, you may get picked up by press, and it may be a viewpoint that no one is really familiar with, and that's an advantage. So you have to think about content marketing as being linked with, you know, all of the other channels like PR and social, thought leadership, all of these things, awareness building that are important for, you know, startups to get their name out there.
Yeah, so thanks a lot to the members of the panel. Yeah.